All right, thank you, DJ, and thank you everybody for coming out. I'm really happy to share what I know and help everybody get a better understanding, or at least give everyone a working knowledge where they can dive deeper into mission scripting. But this is hopefully going to tear down some of those barriers to entry for you guys. Um, yeah, I'm also a Fox 3 customer, have been for a while, and one of the things that's bugged me with a lot of the missions uh, that come with scripts is most of them didn't work on Fox 3 servers in the early days, and so I needed to learn how to dig in and fix those issues. Uh, so I'm going to start off. We're going to talk a little bit about some high-level Lua stuff. I don't know how many of you have a background in any kind of coding or even any, how computer savvy you guys are. So we're going to quickly talk about. Yeah, it's inverted again. I just had it fixed. Uh, yeah, let's go edit, transform, flip. All right, did that do it? All right, all right. Yeah, so this outline here will be attached to the video recording that we upload, so you guys will be able to go and find all these reference links. So don't worry about writing any of this down. But Lua is the scripting language that DCS uses. There's an incredibly massive amount of the DCS game files that are just Lua files. That define weapon systems, they define jet characteristics, weapon characteristics, um, and a lot of those files have been locked down now by ED, so you can't go and modify them to turn your AMRAAMs into nuclear missiles. Um, but once upon a time, that was a thing you could do. Um, but Lua is the language that the game uses throughout all of its parts. So this is actually a pretty old language. Anybody who's been modding video games for a while might remember Civ 4 mods. All of that was in Lua. There's a couple other big games over the years and decades that have used Lua as well. Um, you can install Lua on your computer and use it like a programming language. Um, I use a tool in PowerShell. Let me get the right version of PowerShell to install various tools. I use a tool called Chocolatey, but you can do a Choco install Lua, and you can install Lua on your computer, and then you can just write random Lua code and run it. And that was one of the ways I used to get more comfortable with the Lua programming language. I'd go through your classical programming exercise, hello world through print the diamonds with the asterisks. And I'm not going to go quite that in depth with you guys, but I'm going to show you some basic syntax. Um, so yeah, Lua comments are a double dash. Comments are just lines of code that are only there for your own uh, notes. They don't execute. But then everything else, you want to make a variable, you can name it anything, just some name and an equal sign, and then give it a value. And it's angry at me because variable is a global variable. That's something we'll talk about in a second. Um, but now that I have Lua installed, let me restart VS Code. I'll be able to run this little Lua file, variable 5. I'm going to print the value of variable. And then if you've installed Lua, let me get in the right directory. And save the file there. Lua demo. Lua demo. And it prints out 5. So you can do some stuff that's a little more advanced. So one of the things with Lua is that all the variables are technically an object type called table. So I'll define a table called myTable. And then you can put things in the table like by key value pair. So a lot of times if you want it to be ordered, you'll use a number. they always start at 1, which is different from most other programming languages where you start with 0. But in this case, we start with 1, and you can assign values to the different indexes in the table. You can use things that are not, like you can have more than just strings as values. So in the third element, I'll put an expression 6 plus 7, and then in the fourth entry, I'm actually going to put another table, and I'm going to define this one inline. I'm pretty sure I did that wrong. Missing symbol. Yep, I did something wrong. It's all right. We'll define it differently. So now you can go into my table for 1 and do some value, and then you can go back to my table fourth element and do a second sub element of that table, and you can build complex structures with that. So if you wanted to iterate through this table, there's a couple of functions. You will see the use of tables and functions a lot when I start showing you some of the DCS code, which is why I'm spending time here. So there's a lot of iteration that happens when you have big data sets. You want to go check this one, then this one, then this one, and so on and so forth. So there's some functions built into Lua, specifically the pairs function. So you can, the pairs function will take a table, and for k and v in pairs, it's going to iterate through each index, the key, which will be assigned to k, and the value, which will be assigned to v. And it'll just cycle through everything in the list. I'm going to show you that. So you can do a print. The key is when you want to, so there's addition and there's concatenation. When you want to append a string to another string, that's concatenation. So we want to concatenate the value k to this string that we're printing. So we use the dot dot, that is the concatenation operator for Lua. And then we're going to print the value as well. And missing symbol. Let me just check my notes real quick before I do it wrong. Nope, no missing symbol. All right, now we're going to run our Lua demo. In for K and V in pairs. I forgot a bit. But you can see, because I missed that and I tried to run it, it gives me a pretty obvious error message. When you run mission scripts, these error messages are going to show up in your DCS log. So if you ever have a scripting error, check the DCS log and you'll find an equivalent error like this, because it's just running a Lua interpreter, so it's going to print the same kinds of errors. So now that we fixed that error, it thinks it has another. Concatenate V. So now it's upset because this this value is not a thing it can automatically convert to a string. So there's a built-in function in Lua called toString that will handle that for you. So if you ever have a value that, like a table that you want to print out, or some numbers that don't convert to a string easily, you can wrap it with this toString. This also works in the DCS environment. So now you can see here we executed the code, and then it just iterates through. It printed our variable 5 first because we left that in there. And then it goes through in order, key 1, key 2, key 3, key 4. And it doesn't actually print the table, it just gives you a memory RAM address for where that table is saved in your RAM. But there's ways you can dig down into those. But I just wanted to show you this syntax quickly, how to iterate and how to build tables, because that's going to be important going forward. Um, there's a couple other things when you're building strings. Um, one example with the foothold missions, actually, uh, the file path that Windows gives you has backslashes, but in Lua, backslashes are used for escape characters, and there's a link to a blog in the outline that y'all will get that talks about escape characters. So if you put a backslash, it's not actually a backslash. Um, backslash, um, I think it's, yeah, backslash n. Let me zoom in on this text. Is the new line character. There's a backslash a for different punctuation, but they're all codes for special characters, and the backslash is like the main operator. So if you're familiar with HTML, the ampersand is equivalent to the backslash in this case. So if you want to do file paths, always use a forward slash. Never use a backslash in a path. There are some other escape characters that use the percent sign. I'm going to show you some examples of that later, but they're specifically for when you're searching within strings. There are a lot of resources that will give you an in-depth detail into the DCS Lua environment. There's one from Eagle Dynamics, and there's a couple others I'll link. But this big document really just kind of walks you through all the basics, like what types of objects are there, what kinds of things you can interact with, and a couple of things on how to interact with and how you can track objects and perform actions. There's the Lua environment, symbol structure, which is really just how things are named. Um, you'll get used to the naming conventions the more you work with the DCS scripting environment. But DCS scripting environment has a different naming convention than Moose, has a different naming convention than Mist. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there. Let's see. We'll come back to trigger action and writing messages, but now I want to jump us into the mission editor and actually start using some Lua scripts. So we're just going to make a brand new Mariana's mission. Yes. Yeah. Consider this more of a survey presentation than an in-depth how-to. Um, but there should be some things from this video and the recording that you guys will be able to take and use. You'll be able to do something with Mist by the end of it. You're just not going to be all the way there, you know. So we're in the mission editor, and I want to set up a scenario where I can fight a MiG-29 over and over and over again. And so I'm going to drop the F-15. I'm going to stay away from mod planes, and I'm gonna make him veteran because I'm not actually gonna fly it. And then I'm gonna make another plane that's gonna be my enemy MiG. Oops. And I want him to be Belarusian, and I want him in a MiG-29. And I'm gonna just go ahead because I plan to use this unit in a script. I'm gonna go ahead and sync up the name and the pilot name. It's usually a good idea to make sure these are the same or at least similar. Sometimes I'll put a -1 here, so when you increment them out, it's -1 through 4. But if there's just one, I'll leave that out. I'm also going to give this guy some orders. So I'm going to give him a waypoint heading towards that eagle there. And in the advanced waypoint options, the global ones, not the ones that are connected to a specific waypoint, but this third tab here, I'm going to tell him to do an en route task, search then engage, and tell him to just go after airplanes. Then I'm going to set him as late activation, and what I'm going to do is this F-15 that's going to be flown by an AI instead of me is going to fly out here, and this MiG-29 is just going to keep respawning over and over and over again. So to do that, first we need to add an import trigger for mist. So I like to use the color coding and color code my triggers and give them names. The trigger needs to be a mission start. You can try a once, but I've had mixed luck with the once trigger and time after. Mission start works every time. And then on the action side, we don't need a condition because it's already mission start. On the action side, we're going to do script file. And then if you've downloaded Mist from the GitHub website, there's two files, mist.lua and then mist with a version number. I like to use the version number one because then when I go back and I modify a mission, if there's a newer version of Mist, I know what version it was to know if it's out of date or not. Because the version's in the file name. If you just use, you can use the bare bones mist.lua, you just don't know what version it is unless you write it down somewhere else. So I like to use the one with the version number in the name, and now we have mist imported as soon as the mission starts. So to make that MiG respawn, we need another trigger, and it's going to be a repetitive action with no event. So when all these triggers are evaluated, every trigger will be evaluated once per game cycle. So the game engine is going to have cycles. They're not going to map one-to-one to your CPU cycles. If you have a really fast CPU, your game cycles could be really short. If you have a slow CPU, your game cycles could take longer. Typically, you have to get into like the thousands of triggers range before you notice a performance impact on mid-range CPUs. So keep that in mind if you're trying to build something really, really ambitious, you might, once you start getting into those, nearing 1,000 triggers, you might notice some issues. But when less than 600, you're fine. So it's going to evaluate this every cycle. And so this is a repetitive action, so it can evaluate this one over and over and over again. We're going to add a condition for group dead. And we're going to choose our enemy MiG. And then here we're going to do script, and we're going to enter some free text. So any mist commands you're going to use are always going to start with mist dot. Apologies for the small text. The DCS editor won't scale for me. But for this command, there's a particular command, respawn group. So you can do mist dot respawn group with a capital G, and then the name of the group you want to respawn, and then a number of seconds you want it delayed. Now this command is a little weird. If you don't include the number, it'll respawn immediately, but the jet will RTB to its nearest airbase. If you have the number, it'll count down that many seconds, and then it'll respawn the group, and the group will resume whatever mission you had assigned to them. In the case of our guy, we gave him an engage, search then engage directive. If you want them to respawn immediately and to resume their mission, you can just type true here instead of giving it a number, and they'll respawn immediately and continue that mission that you had assigned to him in the mission editor. I'm going to give this guy a 10-second delay before he resumes his mission. And then I'm going to hit play, and I'm just going to, I need to save it. Demo mission. Oh, yeah. Yes. Both, actually. So when clients join the server provides a download of the .mis file. You can actually see these in the track files in your save games directory. And if you remove some fluff from inside of that file and you rename it .mis, you can play the mission that you played on that server. So the clients download the MIS and they're all running the mission in parallel. And occasionally they compare notes for like unit positions and who's alive and who's dead. And when somebody's computer gets a little behind and then they compare notes and there's a difference, that's when you see desync. Yeah, yeah, without getting too far in the weeds. Yeah. So, okay. So the liveries, they only exist in the mission file as references, and they're always references to liveries that exist on the computer that created the mission. If you open the MIS file, say I create a MIS with a bunch of custom skins I have on my machine, and then oh, I didn't activate the MIG. Uh, yeah, he doesn't need to be late activation. So that, yeah, the liveries. So if I create a mission with custom liveries on my computer, I save it, I send it to you. If you open that mission in your mission editor and you even click on an aircraft that I put a custom skin on that you don't have, it will revert to one of the skins that you have. And then when you save that MIS file, it'll have only references to skins that you have. So the only way we've found with liveries is to share them with everybody. So we use a Google Drive, and we just have a liveries folder that everyone downloads and copy pastes. We don't share it publicly because that would violate the redistribution of certain authors' licenses that they publish their work under. And we're not trying to rip anybody's stuff off or become an alternate source for them. This is just like, hey, you want to play with us and you want to see our skins, we have a private folder we can share. But we do also keep an updated list of the original links so we can go back and get updates. And if anybody ever does yell at us, we can say that we're still attributing the authors. But yeah, redistributing skins gets sticky. That goes into a whole other topic. No, the skins cannot be required. The only reason mods are required is because they piggyback on the same mechanism that requiring a certain map or a certain asset pack works. So like if you make a mission with the World War II assets pack, people have to have the World War II assets pack to join the mission. It's using the same mechanism that uses. But yeah, liveries can't be required. All right, so our F-15 has shot our MiG-29, and then he respawned. And he's going to keep doing this infinitely because we just said anytime he dies, he should respawn 10 seconds later. So you can create repeatable waves of aircraft or formations. One thing we've done on CAG early on, we had a target practice playground where we had formations of aircraft set to respawn over and over again, and they were set to ignore threats so we could practice gunnery. And so we would just have this four ship of like B-52 bombers, and we'd come up behind them and gun them all, and then we'd wait 90 seconds and they'd respawn, and we'd go do it again and again and again. So this is really great for creating training scenarios. You can also use flags to turn this respawning on or off, and you can add radio menus for that. That's all stuff that is covered in the DCS Mission Editor manual. That's in all of your install directories, so I'm not going to go too in depth there because we're focusing on Lua. But there's a lot of possibilities just with this simple mist command, just being able to respawn the same enemies over and over and over again. If you wanted like a persistent patrol over an enemy airbase, you could do this, and then when the airbase falls, you could turn it off with a flag. Um, so that's just kind of a quick thing with Mist. There's a bunch more with Mist. Mist can dynamically add units onto the map that weren't there before. It can create blocks of static items. just to give you guys an idea of the possibilities with that tool. Um, so we've looked a little bit at how to add mist and use it a little bit. There's another script that you guys can download and add called CTLD. Probably most of you guys are familiar, but if you like to do helo things, this really spices up your missions, and it's as easy, almost as easy as just adding another trigger. So I'm going to clone my mist import. Mission start, import CTLD. And then instead of doing the mist script file, I'm going to go to CTLD and I'm going to just pick their default script. So one thing about CTLD is that the script is its own documentation. And so you can see there's lots of comments telling you what all these settings do. You can enable sling loading to use a simulated version or use the built-in game sling loading. You can enable or disable hover pickups, smoke markers, distance variables, thresholds on how many things you can build. But what this script does is it allows you to set up certain zones where you can pick up crates and in a helo and then fly them somewhere else, and then you can assemble those crates into an Abrams tank or a NASAM or an ammo truck or all of the above or Hawksite. And you can configure this and customize it. There's lots of documentation on the GitHub for this one that it will also be linked in the outline. But the thing I wanted to draw attention to is these tables. So these are all Lua tables. Yeah, that's what I missed. I missed the extra brackets earlier. So this is a table that defines all of the pickup zones for CTLD, and they're all pre-named. So we can create. So we just look at the documentation: pickup, drop-off, and waypoint zones. You can give them colors, yada yada. We're just going to use the default names for now. But what this means is that if a helicopter lands in this zone, they can pick stuff up and take it somewhere else to drop it off. So we need a trigger zone. That's this little circle with an X. I'm going to put it at Anderson, 500 feet radius. I'm going to name it pick zone 1, all lowercase, to match what was in that script. And then the other thing we need to see, there's drop-off zones. So this is if you wanted to extract troops and then take them to a drop-off zone. You can only drop things off in the drop-off zone. You would name it drop zone 1, 2, 3, so on, or modify these names to match what you have in your mission editor. Waypoint zones I don't use much, but these can be used for orchestrating the AIs. So you can have an AI that goes somewhere, picks something up, and then goes somewhere else and drops it off. But then here is the important part, is the transport pilot names. So these are all of the names of helicopters that will be allowed to pick things up and drop them off. So Heli Cargo 1, we're going to make a Huey named Heli Cargo 1. One of the tricks with this one is that the name and pilot name have to be the same, and there can only be one unit in the group for CTLD to work. This is actually pretty common with other helo operation scripts as well, because the DCS scripting environment won't let you address a single unit in a group. It's by the whole group. So that's why you see a lot of choppers that are a singleton group. And then one more thing in here. Extract groups, ground units you can extract. And then there's this logistics units. These are, you have to be within so far of one of these to load crates, as well as in a pickup zone. So I'm going to drop a static unit, not on the runway. And I'm going to call him Logistic 1. And I'm just going to park him right there. And I wanted that to be a Huey. So I'm going to quickly show you how this works now. So we added our trigger, then we added a trigger zone that matched a name in the script, a logistics unit, a static logistics unit that matched a name in the script, and a helicopter client slot with a name and pilot name from inside the script. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and then I'm going to fly the Huey in fast forwarded time and show you guys that now that it's set up. All right. So we're in our zone. You can see the little static element there right above my rotors. It's just a little buggy. And now we can go to the F10 other menu, and there's a CTLD menu now. Troop transport, load a standard group, and then I gotta get out of the zone to drop them off. Gonna fast forward. Now we're gonna land. Oh man, I've never done that in 2x speed before. So now we can go back to that menu, CTLD, troop transport, and unload troops. And now there are soldiers on the ground that I didn't place anywhere in the mission editor. CTLD does that all through Mist. But yeah, so you can see how to set that up. There's an add-on script that I've written because I really hated using names like HeliCargo1, and I really wanted to call it like Anderson UH-1H-1 and -2. And these names don't match what's in the script, and I really hated going into the script and then changing all the names because I have some missions that have upwards of 250 helicopters on the map, so that's just a total pain in the ass. So what I've done, and this leads us into Moose, I used Moose to add on to CTLD. You can use Moose and Mist together, so that's extra powerful. Moose provides this object called the database, _database, and it contains basically lists of everything. Trigger zones, there's a list of those. Clients, there's a list of those. Static units, there's a list of those too. So you can iterate, you might recognize the pairs function here, through that list, and then you can identify things in the list. So one of the things I noticed in the CTLD script was that this this also brings us to another discussion about scope. So CTLD here is global. And I know it's global because it doesn't say local before it. So there's no local, it's global, which means you can access it just like Mist. You can say mist.respawn group. You can access the internals of CTLD from other scripts. So this script, I surround everything in a do end because it encapsulates what's inside of this block and makes it not accessible to other scripts. So if there was another function called get CTLD units, these wouldn't collide because they're insulated from one another. This one's local. But this goes through and it gets the count, hashtag CTLD transport pilot names +1, how many units, what is the length of that list, the hashtag, add 1, and that's the element that I'm going to add next because I want to add a new name. And then for every client, I get their name and then the client detail, and then I search their names to see if they have UH1H, MI24, MI8, MTV2, AH64, and so on. But I use this % because this string.find uses regex, and the hyphen means something else by itself, and so it needs to be escaped with a % in this case. rather than a backslash because it's a regex and not a Lua escape sequence. Um, but this will then go and find all of my UH1Hs and it will add them to the transport pilot names so that they're enabled for the menu. So I'm going to create another script trigger at mission start. I'm going to clone the CTLD one. I'm going to call it pilot names. But just so you can see, before I add my script, I'm going to jump into one of these other helos and show you how the menu's not there. And then show you that the script actually makes a difference. All right, so I'm in my Huey. I have no F10 other menu. It's just not there. But I can go get in heli cargo 1. Oh. Oh. I broke something. Import CTLD, import mist. Yes, great time for questions. Yeah, like a do file and reference a file path location? Yes, it is possible. I was actually going to get to that at the end. So some people write really elaborate scripts and they spend a lot of time on it and they don't want people to rip them off. And because you worked really hard on your code, and if you want to keep it private, you should be able to keep it private. You can put your mission scripts in a different location, and then in the triggers, instead of do file, you'd say do script, and you would type out do file and then the full path to that script you want to run. I straight up broke it. Uh-oh. Yeah. Control Z. Oh. I set it to local. That's what I did. Yep. Yeah, computers are not smart. They do exactly what they're told and nothing more. CTLD find pilots. Oh, I know where I saved that now. All right, so I've all right, so I should see. Oh man, I really broke it. This worked earlier when I practiced it. Um, I practiced it. Yeah, building up false hope. So what this should have done is it should have accessed inside the CTLD transport pilot names, and then it would have added the next number name for every unit it found that matched any of these names, using the percent sign to make the hyphen work correctly. And then it should have logged them all out using this env.info call. So you can log things out to your DCS logs at will using that. Let me pull up my logs. And we'll probably see what broke. It'll be a good exercise, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I might just have to do a supplementary later. All right. CTLD, transport pilots. It didn't log a damn thing. Come on, show me the logs. the logs now? DCS doesn't want to lose focus. There we go. Cockpit, cockpit. Hey, look, there's an error. Call error Lua export next frame. That's something else. That's a mod. Here we go. Attempt to call field get CTLD units, a nil value. So that means I have something wrong in my script. Get CTLD units. Oh, I had it prefixed. So now it's going to work after I update the trigger. So one of the things that's a little burdensome, and this is a good place to mention it, when you're editing scripts and then you want to update them, usually you have to go back to your trigger and then go and reopen that file. And that, it sucks. So now I should be able to get in this Anderson UH1H. Nope. Yep. Trying to get, there we go. CTLD ready. Okay. I think I know what I did wrong. So originally I had made this script a part of CTLD, but then CTLD updates it, and not everybody wants this behavior, so I keep having to reapply it. And I just thought it would work as an external script, but it apparently doesn't, because I need to CTLD init. Where is it? Init. Already initialized. So what I need to do is I need to change CTLD's initialization. Initialize, get timer +2. I'm going to give it 5 seconds. And if this doesn't work, I'm just going to copy paste it into CTLD so you can see how it adds the names. Alright, so we're going to go and update the CTLD script by browsing to it again. Actually, I'm going to grab this version because it already has that script added. So this script, I just added the function in the middle of it. So it sets up transport pilot names. I deleted a bunch of them by default, so there's only a handful of the default ones. And then this function runs. So I modified it with this code, but this database clients comes from Moose. It's the only part that comes from Moose. Everything else is just bare bones Lua. And then, yeah. So got that in there. We're gonna run it. Hit start. And now Anderson UH1H. Nope, it's angry at me. Okay, moving on. So apologies for that not working. What should have happened is I should have added the menu for the other UH1Hs. So going into Moose, Moose can do a lot of things. One of the things it's most famous for is the capture coalition. I'm not going to go into that because it takes a long time to explore, but it lets you make zones that can be attacked, captured, defended, neutral. They have like a whole life cycle and flow of states they go through. Um, Moose is a little more object-oriented than Mist, but both can be used together and they can kind of both help each other out. So the first one I'm going to show you, this is the danger zone. Um, we created this script at CAG because we wanted to have a no-fly zone over Vegas. So we made a zone that if anybody flew into it, they exploded. So this uses, so I followed CTLD's example and I created a local object rather than global. And then I put everything between a do and end. I log something out so I know when my script has started running, and then I have little setup values just like CTLD had. I use comments to put links to documentation I used when I was looking this up. And then here, I'm using a moose call to create a new zone. So this zone, this is a trigger zone, and so I have to have a trigger zone called danger zone on the map somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and add the danger zone. Make sure the name is typed just like that. And I'm going to go for 5,000. And I'm going to put the danger zone in between the MiG and the F-15 so you can see the 15 fly into it and get blown to hell. The unit names don't matter here. So we got our zone, we're good. So Moose provides, in addition to the database object that we tried to use with CTLD, it offers this thing called set group, where you can basically create queries to get a list of units or unit groups that fit certain criteria. So this group I called Unfortunate Ones uses a new set group query that filters for only the blue coalition, only airplanes, and then filter start is like your execute query. There's also a helicopter category, but I was only worried about airplanes for this one. Then I made an internal function. This is just a Lua function declaration. And it has args and time because I wanted to call it with another Lua function that's actually part of DCS, the schedule function. You can schedule a function to be called every set amount of time, which is useful for things like checking if units are inside a zone, checking to see if is this zone under attack, or checking to see if something is dead yet. You can also use it to save progress. So if you wanted to save, these units are dead, you could keep every time they die, add them to a list, and then periodically save that list to a file. So we've got some logging, danger zone is searching, and then Unfortunate Ones, it ends up returning the set group. Set group in Moose, let's just open the documentation, has this for each, which is just an iterator. It's just a different kind of iterator. But I followed this documentation, and then what it does is for every group, it goes, are you in the zone? And if that group is in the zone, it sends a message, group name went right into the danger zone, sends the message to all. So this is another Moose call, message new. I'm just getting the group's name and adding it to the string. It'll linger for 10 seconds, and then I send it to everyone. And then the group gets destroyed. So we're going to see that work. First, we have to add a trigger for Moose. That's why the other thing didn't work. Look at me figuring that out. So yeah, we're going to need a Moose trigger, if I can spell it right. Just like like Mist, Moose has a couple of Git repositories and a couple of different files you can include. So the Moose include GitHub repository is the one to go for, and I use the Moose include static, and I use the one with the underscore because it doesn't have any comments in it, so the file is actually smaller by a significant amount, and that can help save a little bit on your .mis file size, which then also helps with loading times when people join your mission and they might have limited bandwidth because they're in the UK or Australia or Dubai, and every little bit, helps lessen that loading screen. So I use the one that doesn't have comments, has the underscore in the name. Um, and then we're going to add another trigger for danger zone. And I'm going to just browse to my custom script that I think I put in my downloads folder. Are there any questions? This is a great spot for questions. Okay. Actually, I'm going to get in this one and see if the menu works now. Oh, look at that. It doesn't. All right, that's cool. So this F-15, yeah, so this F-15 is going to explode when he gets into the danger zone, which is invisible, and we'll see a message to all coalitions on the top right of the screen when he gets in there that'll say Aerial 1 went right into the danger zone as he disappears. And we'll speed it up. And anytime now. Yep, boom, he exploded. So now that zone is only hostile to blue guys, so the MiG can fly right through it because he wasn't a part of our unfortunate ones list. Uh, so that this mission, by the way, will be available to you guys as well, linked, so you can take my scripts apart and adapt them. One other version of this script I made was the dogfight zone, where when you fly into it, it spawns one MiG-29. And that MiG-29 will keep spawning back after you kill it as long as you're in the zone. So this one works very similarly. It has a different name for the zone because I was using Rhode Island Fight Zone. I'm going to name this guy Bad Guy. So zone new, we just need a trigger zone called Fight Zone. But now this enemy declaration, I'm spawning an object. So Mist can create things out of essentially nothingness, whereas Moose needs you to place something on the map. So I'm gonna make a bad guy Belarusian Sukhoi 27. I'm gonna drag him to the south side of the island so we can de-escalate between the MiG-29 and he. I'm gonna give him late activation, but I am gonna give him some directions and weapons, and I'm gonna say in these global waypoint actions, I'm gonna tell him to do an en route task, search then engage. Additionally, I'm going to set an option reaction to threat to evade fire. So by default, this is set to allow abort mission, and a lot of times the AI will just turn tail and run as soon as they spawn in, unless you change this option. I've seen like an F-15 rolls up and 4 MiG-29s just turn cold and run, jettison their tanks and run. And it's really upsetting when it happens, so I try to turn it off. All right, so he's late activation. His name is Bad Guy. And then we have our fight zone. So we're going to make another trigger zone. Make this one maybe not that big. Maybe, no, that big's fine. That's fine. And the zone is going to be fight zone. Yeah, maybe that's too big. That's better. All right, so one thing I want you to notice is that this guy I've placed, he's not inside of the zone, but he is late activation. So this spawn command here, I create a new spawn for bad guy, and so what that's going to do is it's going to look at that group, and it's going to use it as a template. And when I actually call the spawn command on it, it's going to basically copy paste that unit group. Init limit 1, that means there can only be 1 alive at a time. You could set it to 2 for it to spawn up to 2 at a time. And then 999 is there are 999 times it can be respawned. This on spawn group is just a callback where you can put a function inside, and I just had it log something out. Oh, and we need it's a Sukhoi 27, not a MiG 29. Yeah, it gets the group name that entered the zone versus Sukhoi 27 fight, and it sends that to everybody. We have our contenders list again, just like our unfortunate ones. We do a set group, new, filter coalitions, filter start. This one doesn't filter down by aircraft, so it includes helicopters as well. Also ground units or ships. So if a boat wandered in there, it would trigger the zone. This is something I haven't used yet, so we're going to skip it. Then I have my function, just like the danger zone had the function where it actually checks what's in the zone. Dogfight zone is searching for a contender, and it does a for each group. And then it goes, are you in the zone? And if you are in the zone, then it's going to call spawn in zone on the enemy. And then it's going to go to that zone we declared the fight zone. Theoretically, you could use a different zone to enter and trigger the spawning of the aircraft, and a different zone to spawn the aircraft in. It's like if you wanted them only to spawn on one side of the zone. But for simplicity, we're just going to use one. This one is also set on the schedule function, and it's going to run every, how long? 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, it's going to check, are you in the zone? If so, it's going to spawn a fighter, if there's not one already. So let's set that up. We got our fight zone, we got our bad guy. That's a client. I'm going to put him really close. Really close. And then, oh, I forgot. We've got to add our trigger. So we're going to do another mission start trigger. And then do script file. And we're going to browse to our script. And now we'll run it. Okay, so as soon as this unpauses, I'm going to fast forward a bit. So I should be entering that zone any second now. Oh, and now that 27 spawned, but he spawned closer because I told him to spawn in the zone. And if I were to kill him, another aircraft would spawn. So let me just try to do that real quick. No pressure. And I'm doing it in fast forward for your benefit. Nope, that's a missile out at me. He got me, but I got him. But I'm also not in the zone anymore. So if I respawn, it's weird about switching slots in single player. So if I do that again, yep, and now he spawned again. But there can only ever be one of him alive because we have that init limit in the script. So you can set up triggered encounters using moose in a zone, so you could have a dogfight zone where you 1v1 a Sukhoi 27 or a MiG, or if you wanted to do some dogfight practice and you wanted to practice against multiple aircraft, you could set up a zone for each aircraft, and then you fly into the zone and you kill the guy and you get out. And then you go to another zone, fight somebody else, and get out. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. Um, so linking external script files. I think we're getting close to the end. Are there any questions before I go down that rabbit hole? Oh, I see chat. Real noob here, since you're using Moose, do you have examples on enhanced GM? I am not familiar with enhanced GM. Google it. Enhanced Game Master script. No, no Google. I'm not talking to you. I'm gonna have to look at that. Basically Zeus, but for DCS. Well, that sounds pretty cool. I've used Zeus with oh, and it builds on top of Moose. Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of that before, but I will check it out, and I may release a yeah, I might release a supplemental at some point where I dive into that. Thank you for pointing that out. Ah, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, yeah, if you wanted to link to an outside script, I'm trying to find it. Let's get that CTLD script, the not broken version. CTLD. And then, so instead of linking to the CTLD script the original way, let's see, where was it? Let's get, okay, so I'm going to do script, and then it's do file c:/users, my username, get DCS CTLD. Let me verify that path. Oh, it's a dash, not an underscore. /ctld.lua. So that's going to link to where it is on my hard drive, but I had to use forward slashes, not backslashes. If you do backslashes, I mean, you could do them, but you have to double them up every time you use one. Because it's you have to escape the backslash with a backslash. But typically, it's just easier to do forward slashes and not worry about missing a backslash. All right, so confirm that path one more time, DCS CTLD.lua. All right, so we know CTLD prints in the logs when it initializes, so to verify that this works, I'm going to save it, I'm going to launch the mission, and then I'm going to go watch the logs, because it's way easier than trying to pick through the menus and wait for everything to initialize just right. So if Notepad++ would stop being a bugger. There we go. That's so weird. Okay, scripting. So Moose include, that initialized. Scrolling down, CTLD, loading version. So it worked. And that picked it off from my my file system rather than being embedded in the MIS. We can also go and validate that the CTLD script is not in the MIS by going to missions. Where did I save it? I think it's demo mission. Let's look at the times. Yep, that's the newest one. So I use 7-zip. You could use other things. If you open the archive in the i10n/default folder, you will find all of the Lua scripts that you add via triggers do script file, and you'll notice that ctld is missing because we linked to it dynamically on the file system. And so yeah, so that's how you do that. If you want to keep your code proprietary, you just in the trigger. I wish I could zoom in on it. This do file, I'm gonna put it in VS Code and make it really big. This is what I used. Just do file, all lowercase. Wrap your path in quotes, use forward slashes, not backslashes, and that'll do it. So you can use this little 7-zip trick to do a lot of things. One of the things I like to do, I hate updating scripts through the triggers. So if I want to change code, I will actually keep copies of my files outside of the Miz, and I'll modify them, and I'll just drag and drop them into the Miz through 7-zip, and it'll replace them. If it's a mission that I'm going to patch, like a foothold or a Surexin mission, we don't have to patch foothold anymore, which is awesome. But Surexin missions still need patches for the persistence to work on Fox 3 servers. And I'll just go in here and right-click, open the Lua file in VS Code. I'll find the line I need to modify, and then I'll go do it. Save it. So if I wanted to change, oh, I didn't know he didn't do it to Syria. Oh man. Yep. Yeah. Yes. So yeah. So I've been using. I know because I have scraped the directory structure that was uh, exposed to me via the DCS file browser. I could see folders, but not what they were in, so I got an idea of what the directory structure was. And I know that my server lives at C users luck saved games dcs.openbeta_server/missions. And then I created a subdirectory there called Ms scripts. We had a mission editor in our group for a while who he really wanted to keep his code private. Like he worked really hard on it and he did some great work. And he didn't want to get it ripped off. And so we set up that Ms scripts folder for him, and he put all of his scripts in there. One of the benefits was if he wanted to modify the script, he could modify the script, sync it through the OneCloud, because we were still using that at the time, and then you just restart the mission, and the mission will load the script from the file system, the new version. So it was kind of awesome because it was much quicker to get changes and stuff. But that's what I did. I think you can also do lfs.write_dir and concatenate with a /missions. The new foothold. Yep, yeah. Yep, so the lfs.writedir, that's a DCS scripting thing. LFS is a Lua library local file system, but the writedir field is specifically created in DCS and it points to your saved games DCS directory. So then you add the suffix of missions and then ms scripts / and then your script names. And you could actually, you could, go ahead. Yes, LFS should already be unsanitized as well as IO. So that should, yep, yeah. So if you wanted to have a whole bunch of scripts, you could write a single Lua file with just a bunch of these do file directives, and you could have as many as you wanted, and then you could load that Lua file externally in a trigger, and so you'd only have one trigger, and it could load as many scripts as you want, and you could add more scripts without updating the mission. It gets a little crazy once you start pulling in code from outside of the Ms file. Um, there is the consequence of track files that players download will not work. Um, it just doesn't. Um, desync can be a little bit of an issue, particularly if there's a lot of spawning of units. Uh, if it's not too bad, like if you're not spawning 100 units at a time, what happens with the external scripts when you spawn the units is that the external scripts spawn them, and then everybody's client desyncs as they catch up with, oh, there's more units in here now, because they didn't have the scripts in their Ms copy to spawn them in their simulation. Um, yep, yeah. If if you're doing mist spawns, they come out of nowhere though. And if you're doing dynamic spawns with Moose, you could be spawning one late activation template group at every airbase. And we we had a zone capture coalition map on Syria we were trying to test out, and we had 50 ground units at every airbase, and it crashed the server every time. So you can go a little overboard, but that was 50 times 75 air bases. So it was a little too much. Um, yeah, so as long as you don't go too overboard and you stagger out your spawns, you can still work with it, especially if everybody has enough bandwidth that resyncing with the server can happen quickly. But once you start getting with people who are on different continents, it may cause not insignificant lag. We have gone way over time. Yeah, thank you all for coming out. I'm happy to share information and contribute to the community.